All right, we are smack dab in the middle of winter, and do you think the bites are actually picking up or slowing down? Well, we're going to discuss that on today's Winter Quest episode, and I'm going to give you some tips on how you can capitalize to continue to catch fish from now until spring. All right, let's get into this video. All right, fishing family, welcome back to another episode of Winter Quest. Hey, we are in the heart of winter, and it's so cold right now. Hey, Florida just got record-breaking snow. I mean, they're down there trying to drink their pina coladas, and they got green iguanas falling out of trees, almost smacking them in the head. So, do the bites actually slow down in the heart of winter? Well, January will have better bites than November and December for me here in Tennessee. So, come 1 month from now, when we get to March, I will have had 36 consecutive months of creek fishing. So I have seen all the transitions for 3 years. I have fished from winter into the spring bite into pre-spawn, spawn, post-spawn, the dog days of summer that stink. Then you get into that fall feed up, and then right back into winter we go. Well, so the one thing that I've noticed is when we start doing that fall transition here about mid-November in Tennessee, going into that winter cool down, during that spell between November and December, we kind of still have sporadic temperatures. We will have, cold spells, and it'll warm back up and then it'll dip back down. But during that period of time, I seem to have more difficulty trying to catch these fish in the creeks. And I think part of it has to do with, one, they're either getting acclimated to this. Now, this is just a tray thought. There might be some scientific proof out there, but this is just what I have noticed over the course of 3 years doing this. But I think those fish are getting acclimated to those cold spells, and they're probably still kind of moving from that fall feed to wherever they're going to be holding up in their winter haunts. So I'm kind of chasing them at that point when they're kind of in a transition, moving to their spots. Because once January gets here, you're in the heart of winter. Those fish have already gotten to their winter haunts, and they're not going to be moving around. They're pretty much going to stay in that spot from then on until March, before they go ahead and start moving out to go find them the good looking little ladies out there so that they can reproduce during the spawn. From now until March, this is going to be generally when I have my better fishing during winter. All right, so now how can we capitalize on this? Once again, based on our last video, we're talking about you've got to fire on all 12 cylinders. So what we're going to discuss today is Ned Rigs. We're going to go in that. That's a popular rig that you can use for winter. It's very productive, but a couple of small mistakes on this can actually cost you fish, and we're going to go over those today. And stick around, because later in this episode, I'm going to discuss 2 sections of creeks that you need to look for that could be potential wintering holes, because they have proven to be successful spots for me. If you can find these, and I know you can, they're in your creeks, I'm going to tell you what to look for. All right, so when it comes to the Ned Rig, you've got 3 options that you can select from. First, you've got the typical Ned Rig. As you can see here, it's just a straight shank hook. There's no weed guard on this one. The second option you can go with is a straight shank, but you've got a separate weed guard on this. Last but not least, my favorite is the extra wide gap hook on the Ned Rig. This allows you to rig your soft plastics weedless. So you can use all 3 of these based on your specific applications, but let's avoid making these common mistakes, because this could cost you those critical bites when it comes to winter. All right, so let's break down the individual 3 items and give some pros and cons to each one of them to help you optimize how you're going to fish these to catch more fish when it comes to winter creek fishing. So first and foremost, you just got your regular Ned jig. These are going to be straight shank hooks. A lot of them will have a bait keeper on them, and you're going to be fishing these exposed hooks. All right, so if you're not fishing a really extremely chunky or really hangy section in the creek, the exposed hook is a good option to go with if you've got it rigged properly. One downside that a lot of people may do is they're not having a lot of different options on their weights with their hook, and based on their soft plastic they're using and the buoyancy of that soft plastic, it may cause that Ned rig to actually just set down on the bottom, and that's not the presentation you're looking for. All right, so the optimal way to rig these is really go as light on the weight as you possibly can go, so that the soft plastic, the buoyancy of that actually will stand up vertically in the water. That way you get a better presentation. You can work it really slow. If you get a little bit of current, that current may actually cause the tail end of that bait to move around a little bit, and that's very enticing for those bass. Plus, that exposed hook, when they come down to inspect it and they initially suck it up, a lot of times those bites, they may pick them up and then go to spit them back out. But if you've got a really quality jig with a really sharp point on it, it's possible that when those fish go to spit that bait out, they actually skin hook themselves in the top of the mouth, and then you can go ahead and set that hook. Probably the biggest common mistake that people can make when they're rigging up their Ned rig is not having the right weight for the buoyancy of your soft plastic. You want to have both. You don't want that Ned rig to be so heavy that it causes your soft plastic to lay over flat in the water, because then you're not optimizing on the presentation that the Ned rig provides. I want to have a lot of options. I want to have 1/16, 3/32, 1/8. I might even have some of those micro versions that go down to 1/32, just based on whatever those days conditions are and the soft plastic that I'm fishing. So also, when it comes to your soft plastics, make sure you've got a floating soft plastic. I use Ned Wacky. Those are great. They float really well. The Elastec soft plastics float well. Nico floats. Whatever you select, you just definitely want to make sure that it has some buoyancy there. If you've got a heavily salted bait and it's just laying flat in the water, then you're really not optimizing on the presentation that the Ned rig has to offer. All right, so let's move on to our second option, and that's going to be the Ned rig that's got your weed guard on it. And these are another great option if you fish them properly. Now, once again, I will shy away from these on the ultra cold days, just because, once again, I've got to get that weed guard compressed to get that hook set. That's where you get the benefit of actually fishing that exposed hook. It's a little bit easier to get that hook set initially. So on really cold days, if the creek is not real chunky and not real hangy, I'm going to opt for that exposed hook just for the benefit. I'm going to get that better hook set. It's going to be a little bit easier, but here's the upside. So if you are fishing a weed guard, I will tend to fish these on warmer spells, and you've got a secondary kind of insurance policy that once you get that weed guard compressed, you get that fish pinned, it's going to be more likely to keep that fish hooked and keep him from actually spitting that Ned rig out. So that is a benefit that a lot of people aren't aware of. All right, so when would I use these? So maybe on, say, warmer spells where the fish are a little more aggressive. I'm still fishing sections of the creeks that are a little bit hangy, and I'm wanting to work through them, but maybe they're not just really ultra chunky rock. If it's ultra chunky rock, I'm going to go ahead and go straight to the weedless. But let's just say I've got patches of rock here and there and some sediment, and I'm trying to work around those individual structures. This weed guard will give me the assurance that I'm not going to get hung up as easily. Plus, I'm going to have a secondary insurance policy that if I do get those fish hooked up, more than likely, I'm going to be able to keep them pinned with that weed guard, putting pressure on the inside of the mouth. So, hey, this definitely is a good option. All right, so last but not least, probably my favorite of the three, and that's going to be your Ned rig that has the EWG. It's got the extra wide gap bass hook on it. This will allow you to rig your Ned rigs weedless. Once again, this is going to save the pocket, and it's a lot easier. Last thing that I want to do is get out to a creek. Once again, during winter, these wintering pockets are few and far between. You might have one or two in a given section of the creek that you fish. The last thing that you want to do is throw that exposed hook Ned rig out there and get it hung up, have to walk out there or snap it off. You're just losing gear, or you're spooking those fish, because during these winter months too, this water is ultra clear. Those fish are super spooky. You definitely do not want to go in the water, but at the same time, you just don't want to sit there and keep feeding the bank all this lure that you're in there just losing. So that's really the downside when it comes to fishing the exposed hook. So this will be my absolute go-to pretty much for the majority of winter. There might be those one-off situations where I choose the exposed hook. Maybe it's a little muddier section that I'm fishing that's got some little occasional rock here and there that will hold those fish, and then I can work that close to those piles of rock and try to entice those fish away from that structure that they're setting on. But if it's a super duper rocky bottom and it's ultra hangy, you cannot go wrong with the EWG Ned rig. This is the option you definitely want to select. All right, so once again, when it comes to winter creek fishing, small profile is what we're shooting for, and that Ned Rig is definitely a perfect option. All right, so here's how we're gonna rig these. We're gonna rig these almost like you would just do a Texas rig. We're gonna go right in through the tip, come out the side. You wanna match what the distance is right here. So I'm looking at, you know, a little under 1/4 of an inch. Rotate that up just like so. Once you get that in there, you want to find out where your hook's going to come through. Let me see, it's going right there. There we go. There you go. All right, so now we got this rigged. This is looking really nice and straight, and that's what you want to do. Once again, we want to make sure our presentation is absolutely spot on. Now, when it comes to skin hooking your soft plastic in the winter, if the water temperatures are really cold, and I'm not in a section that's super duper hangy, I'm going to do this. Instead of skin hooking, I'm just going to take this soft plastic and push this up to where that tip of my hook is just setting right there horizontally with that bait. As you can see, in winter months, some of your plastics, if it's really cold, they're going to lose some of their pliability. They're going to get a little bit stiffer. And so if I've got that hook, skin hook, or transposed into that soft plastic, once again, it's just more of a hook set, or the potential that I might miss that initial hook set. Once again, we've got to be firing on all 12 cylinders when it comes to winter creek fishing. If you get 3 bites, you want to make sure that all 3 of those bites are hookups and you're landing those fish. And that's just a little small things that you can do that will actually help you during winter creek fishing. All right, guys, so in summation, it doesn't matter whether you choose the typical Ned Rig, the Ned Rig with the weed guard, or the Ned Rig with the EWG hook. If you want to get the full benefit out of this little dynamite package, you need to make sure you're rigging this up properly. Don't overweight that soft plastic and cause it to sit flat on the bottom. If it's setting flat, you need to go back into your backpack, find a lighter Ned Rig and rig it up. Test it again. Make sure that that soft plastic, the buoyancy on it, is going to be able to lift that tail up and give the presentation you're looking for. Once again, it's winter creek fishing. We've got to be firing on all 12 cylinders. And if that soft plastic's setting flat, well, likely you're not going to be catching fish. So make sure you got these rigged up right and proper. And I'm telling you, you're going to catch more fish. You're going to catch a lot of fish. And right now is the time to do it. From now, January until March, we're going to be landing a bunch of fish. And this is a deadly combination if you fish it properly. All right, fish family, it doesn't matter whether you're out here wading the creeks, you're up there on the bank, or you're out here paddling around in your kayak. Heart of winter, you can catch fish, and you can catch a lot of fish. I'm telling you, these fish have gotten acclimated to these cold water temperatures. They've made it to their wintering haunts, and if you can isolate those spots and find them, use the right presentation, you're going to catch these fish. I promise you, you're going to catch a lot of them. You might even find out, like me, I caught more fish 2 years ago, February, than some of my summer months. 27 fish in the middle of winter, and I'm talking about some good fish. 3 18s in a day. One of them even had a lamprey on it, but I'm getting sidetracked. I love this creek fishing. Once again, get out here, put in the time and effort. It's going to take, you know, gonna take some work, but I'm telling you, when you catch those first fish, that's gonna be such a confidence builder. When you get that first one on your belt, you're gonna know, like, hey, I can do this. All right, so when I'm looking for features in creeks, I like to think of it kind of like on the micro scale of features that I might be looking for in lakes and rivers. The 2 best structures that you can go find in a creek, if you can go find these when you're out doing your recon during the summer months, look for these long sweeping turns. You got maybe like a 120-degree turn, maybe to 180. So what makes that real sweeping turn so good is over the years, throughout all the different flooding, what happens is when that water gets raging through that creek, those turns are going to act like a bank of a racetrack. It's going to be funneling that water through. It's going to be digging out the backside of that, and that's what's going to give you that depth for that wintering hole that you're looking for. It's also going to be digging down, you know, maybe exposing good chunky rock that's down there. But what it also does, it creates an eddy on this inside. So what it's doing is, while it's eroding out that backside against that bank, it's also funneling soil and sediment back up and depositing it up on the side that we're going to be standing on. So what happens, you end up with this really nice eroded out deep section. You've got an angled section that comes up, and then it kind of tapers off into a shallow section that can hold those bait fish. So that is really an optimal thing that you can look for. Think of it kind of like lake fishing. You hear a lot of people talk about, hey, I want to go find the points. Well, really the premise of a point is you've got a quick incline that goes up from a deep section up to a shallow point to where those fish don't have to travel that far to go up and feed where those bait fish are setting. This is kind of the same scenario. Look for those long sweeping turns. I have had more luck in those areas of catching fish. Those seem to be ideal wintering holes. All right, so another great feature to look for in creeks, it's the S-turn. When you find those creeks that have a really nice S-turn, you're looking for change in the creeks. Those fish, I generally don't have any type of luck if I'm just in this long section with no change, nothing. But when I get into these sections where it's a nice sweeping turn or S-turn, those are optimal spots to be potential wintering haunts. And here's why. So during those flooding conditions, that water gets up. Imagine you got a bank here and a bank here. So that water's going to come in, it's going to funnel down, and all that pressure is going to erode out a deep section right there. Then that water is going to exit that side, hit the other bank, and divert off and create an eddy once again on that outside. Well, that's depositing soil on the other side. So once again, it's creating kind of a natural point that you would actually fish in a lake. You're going to have a nice deep trough that those fish can hang out in when those water levels are lower. If those water levels do get up a little bit, they can push through the backside of that S-turn up on that shallower side where that eddy is going to be, and that way they don't have to expend a lot of calories moving around a lot. So they're going to position themselves in an area that's optimal for winter feeding. And those points are so great because you've got a nice drop off that goes into that deep pocket, and those fish can come up right on that shelf and feed up there where those smaller bait fish are going to be hanging out. And then once they've got their bellies full, all they got to do is just slide right back off into that deeper pocket and suspend. The biggest thing that I'm looking for in creeks too, I want to find change. I don't want just consistency. I don't want long straights, same depth of water, flat bedrock on the bottom, flat sediment. I don't want none of that. I want change. I want structure. And if you can find those type of elements in your creeks, I think you're going to find out that those spots being actual wintering haunts than some of the other portions of the creeks. So look for those. I think that'll help you out a lot. My winter exploration does not start in November and December. My winter exploration actually starts in the spring months. As soon as I can shed these old waders and I can put on my wading clothes and go start exploring creeks, and I don't have to worry about sliding off in a deep pocket and my waders filling up and potentially drowning, ending up on Channel 5 News as a victim, that's when I'm going to start. You definitely don't want to go out in these winter months being unfamiliar with creeks, and use that time to start looking for these wintering holes. Once again, use your warmer months so you can get out here, you can explore, you can do your recon, you can map them out, you can figure out how you need to navigate through these creeks. I'm sure you know just with some of your creeks, you might have to walk in half a mile on the right hand side, shimmy across the other side, and you're shimmying down the bank, and then all of a sudden you're going to jump a couple rocks and get to the other side. Well, you need to know all these things before you get out in the middle of winter in a pair of waders and slick conditions and start exploring. So keep that in mind. And once again, use those spring months to look for what? That's right. You want to look for those slow bending turns, like 120 to 180 degree turns. Got a real deep pocket off the far side. That could be a good potential wintering hole. You also want to be looking for those nice S turns. It's got that real dugout rutted section and a shallower pocket in behind it. Keep an eye out for those in your spring, summer, fall months. And when winter gets around, you'll be ready to put all these techniques together, be firing on all 12 cylinders, and get out there and fish when everybody else is sitting on the couch. So be safe, guys. We'll talk to you soon. Hey, till next time, grab your poles, coffee buddies, get to make some memories. Give me some elbow. Boom. I love you guys. Be safe. Hey, we'll see you on the next edition of Winter Quest.
Back where I belong. Won't you hold on? I said, baby, just hold on.